everybody. Welcome back to LGBA USA's weekly roundup. So let's just jump right into it. I'm going to start off with some news out of California. We're starting off with Protect Kids California announced Tuesday that they were unable to collect their over 500,000 signatures needed for the petition for the 2024 ballot. They came close with 400,000 collected, but they didn't quite make it for the 2024 ballot. This initiative would have made it illegal to transition underage kids, so 18 and under. It would have mandated that parents be notified if their kid wants to change their name or gender marker at school. So it had some parental rights in there. And it also was going to mandate sex segregated spaces within the schools. So keeping boys out of girls' sports and locker rooms. In their tweet, they said, quote, "We want to thank our tens of thousands of supporters and volunteers for this truly historic effort. Together, we collected over 400,000 signatures, unprecedented achievement for 100% grassroots effort." And let me tell you, it was a grassroots effort. I was involved in trying to collect some of this, and it was definitely grassroots. But, they said that seeds were planted, and that's good. And I agree. I think the seeds were planted, and hopefully moving forward in California, we can kind of get the ball rolling on this. So continuing on in California news, seems like California is a big place to be right now for all this stuff. Women's Liberation Front, WOOF, announced on their Twitter this week that their case, Chandler versus CDCR, was dismissed by a federal judge on a procedural grounds. Now, they didn't really go much further into that. The case was brought about because the case was trying to overturn the bill SB 132. And this bill basically allowed men to self-ID as women and get into women's prisons and transfer into women's prisons. And they brought this lawsuit on behalf of several female inmates who had been assaulted by men going into the prisons. The judge basically threw it out. And I went to a local hearing. One of these men, actually, he's one of these men who was transferred to the prison, is being held. He's back at men's prison. He is on trial for 2 rapes in the women's prison that he was transferred to. I went to that press conference with Wolf, and I spoke to one of the representatives. And the woman told me at the time about this case. She said, I'm not really clear why the judge threw it out, and she kind of feels like the judge might have overstepped and been a little bit of an activist. But we'll find out more as Wolf kind of investigates this and unfolds this. So jumping out of California now, we're going to go to Missouri. So Missouri it's got a little bit of drama going on over there. Attorney General Andrew Bailey, he's expanded his investigation into gender affirming care to therapists and social workers statewide. Obviously, this is going to make a bunch of social workers and therapists very angry that they're being investigated. So the probe initially started last year, and it involved the Attorney General investigating Washington University Transgender Center in St. Louis. And this was prompted by whistleblower Jamie Reed's affidavit. He started asking for records and investigating, if doctors were doing their due diligence and obeying the law when it came to transitioning minors. He's since expanded out his investigation to therapists and social workers statewide. So this is causing quite a stir. And it seems in mainstream media at large, they're kind of framing this as a concern over the Attorney General having access to unredacted medical records of minors. I don't really know if that's an actual legal problem or not, but that's kind of how they're framing it. They're also framing it as putting LGBT TQ healthcare at risk. And I think we all know that's probably not the most accurate thing here, because we're talking about transition medicine, especially with underage, not necessarily everybody. But we're definitely going to stay tuned and see how this unfolds. That's all I have for you. Let's see what Ariane got for you.
Thank you, Carol. So first, we'll turn abroad to the UK, where the government recently enacted an emergency ban on private clinics in England, Scotland, and Wales from prescribing puberty blockers to trans-identified minors. And this follows an earlier ban on the NHS prescribing puberty blockers. And this emergency ban, which covers private clinics, basically closes a loophole, which still allowed private clinics to prescribe puberty blockers, even as the government healthcare system, the NHS, had banned it. So that emergency order banning private clinics from prescribing puberty blockers lasts between June 3rd and September 3rd, after which it would have to be renewed. So turning back to the US, we have some updates on bills involving gender and sexuality issues in schools. So on May 28th, federal judge Paul Barbadoro struck down a New Hampshire law, which is sometimes called the quote unquote divisive concepts law, which restricts what teachers are allowed to teach in public schools. And the law was enacted in 2021 following an executive order from Donald Trump regulating the federal workforce. And what this bill did is it singles out a variety of characteristics, namely age, sex, gender identity, sexual orientation, race, creed, color, marital status, familial status, mental or physical disability, religion, or national origin, and says that schools cannot teach 4 things in relation to these characteristics. First, the school cannot teach that individuals are superior to others based on these characteristics. Second, that schools cannot teach that individuals are inherently sexist or racist by virtue of possessing certain characteristics. Third, that schools cannot promote discrimination on the basis of these characteristics. And fourth, that schools cannot discourage people from treating others without regard to any of these characteristics. So the judge argued that the judge ruled that the law violated teachers' 14th Amendment rights because they were too vague, that the rules were so vague, it was making it too hard for teachers to determine what they were allowed to teach without facing punishment. And there was a teacher that was a plaintiff that argued exactly that, and the judge ruled in his favor. So there's a similar debate about classroom content that's going on in Louisiana, where on May 23rd, the state Senate passed HB 122. This bill bans K through 12 school teachers from 3 things. First, teaching about gender identity or sexual orientation in a way that deviates from state standards or curricula developed or approved by public school governing authorities. 2, teaching students about gender identity or sexual orientation during extracurricular activities. And 3, discussing their own gender identity or sexual orientation. Those are all prohibited under this new law, which passed the state Senate. I think this is an interesting law to follow because its scope is fairly unclear. For example, what sort of teaching about sexual orientation or gender identity is authorized by state standards? Would someone mentioning their same-sex spouse be considered discussing sexual orientation? Would the gay-straight alliance be allowed to exist under the ban on teachers teaching about sexual orientation in extracurricular activities? It seems hard for me to see how this law, if enacted, would survive a court challenge, especially given how that aforementioned New Hampshire law was struck down. Moving on to the following week, on May 29th, the Louisiana Senate passed HB 121, which bans schools from using trans-identified students' preferred pronouns or names without parental consent. All the Republicans and 1 Democrat, Katrina Jackson Andrews, all cited and voted in favor of this bill. So that bill is a much more narrow, has a much more narrow scope than the previous bill. And with that, I mean, Carol, I'm curious to hear your thoughts about where do you draw the line here between what schools should and shouldn't be allowed to do?
Yeah, I think I used to be a little bit more liberal on this, I think, and the gender stuff has really made me realize, well, good lord, maybe we should really just have a strict guidelines where, like, teachers aren't allowed to talk about their personal lives at all. Like, because that's my concern, right? What do they mean by talking about your your sexuality? Is a heterosexual teacher talking about her husband and kids talking about her sexuality? Would a gay teacher talking about their spouse and their kids be talking about their sexuality? I have a feeling that might be talking about your sexuality, but the heterosexual one wouldn't be talking about her sexuality. It's like, because I've seen people use this argument. So I don't know. I mean, I guess you could make those rules where teachers are just not allowed to talk about their personal life at all and just have to stick to curriculum. But I don't know how they're going to draw these lines when that's kind of not how people work usually. People do talk about their lives a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just thinking back about my own experience in school. I mean, teachers would sometimes bring up like, oh, having a spouse or something. It wasn't the focus of the teaching material, but sometimes it would just be an aside. And then in particular, when we were doing things like going on field trips and stuff, and there was much more of a friendly banter with the teachers going on there about various things. And the other thing too is like, I mean, I remember there were all sorts of rumors about like, oh, is this teacher gay?
Yeah.
Or was that teacher gay? And I mean, are we supposed to say that teachers can't just explicitly address those rumors, like, and just say like openly, like, yeah, okay, I'm gay or I'm not? Like it seems like that not allowing teachers to directly say that could actually result in the proliferation of rumors. So
Well,
I'm
so it's like, how are teachers supposed to handle a situation where, a kid comes up and is like, "Do you have kids? Are you married?" I've kids do this kind of stuff all the time, right? Now, you guess you could draw a rule where a teacher would have to say, "Oh, I'm not allowed to discuss my personal life." Um, but right now, that's not the way it works in like our society. Like teachers are pretty open about stuff, so you would have to shut down everybody talking about their personal life, not just some people. I feel like it might be just some people couldn't talk about their personal life.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's likely going to happen, particularly in some of these more conservative, school boards, school areas. I'm curious too, like, would any sort of, any sort of clubs, like I mentioned before, could you even have? I mean, I know how it worked at my school is you had a school club and then you had a teacher um, that was chosen to sort of supervise that club. Are we going to have a situation where you can't like say, well, we're going to have a gay teacher supervise gay straight alliance club?
Yeah, well,
Of course,
obviously,
it's
it's
the
not the
case that a
case.
lot of gay straight alliances aren't really gay straight alliances anymore. They're
Yeah,
gender and sexuality awarenesses, but
and
yeah.
that's what it is at my local one of my local schools.
Hmm.
And the woman who runs that group is a heterosexual woman,
Mm.
which just
Yeah.
annoys me. I don't know, it just annoys me. Um, yeah, I don't. I also think this goes back to that horrible thing of not being of being forced teamed, of not separating out homosexuality from gender identity. Because I don't because you know, I think gender identity is nonsense and shouldn't be taught to kids. It just should it's like a religion, it shouldn't be in schools. But as a gay person, I also want to normalize homosexuality like it's not a big deal. Like it's just a non-issue. It's not special. It's just a non-issue. It's just like anything else, really. You can just say you could just say that you're gay and move on with your day. Like that's it. That needs to be a shirt.
Yeah, that's great. Say that you're gay and move
And
on with.
move on with your day, right? Um, yeah, thinking back when I was in school though, I honestly and up to like 8th grade even, my teachers they never talked about their personal lives. I never heard any of them talk about their personal lives.
Hmm.
So it might be, it might have been something that was maybe, back in a previous couple generations where teachers were much more like, no, you're not supposed to talk about personal lives in school. Because I remembered finding out that a teacher was married and going, oh, by some other student who knew her from outside. But like she never talked about her husband or anything like that. I had one teacher that talked about her husband in 6th grade, but he was the principal of the school, so kind of like made sense.
Well, I went to a fairly small schools. They were private schools. I don't know if that made a difference. Maybe that made the schools feel more cozy and
Maybe these were public
yeah.
schools, so
Yeah, it could be that was part of it. Maybe there's more sort of mutual trust between the students and teachers. Um, I do recall in middle school, teachers did not. There were a few teachers that were kind of rumored to be gay or even commonly known to be gay, but I actually don't think they did openly say anything about that. By the time we got to high school, it's completely different, and teachers
yeah.
were open about that.
Maybe that's the line, right?
Mhm.
Maybe elementary school is something that needs to be more locked down than junior high and high school when kids are older and understand more things and really should know about this stuff anyways. They should know homosexuality exists by the time they get to junior high.
Yeah,
You
and
know?
my school, I went to a K through 8 school and then a high school on a separate campus. So
Mhm.
and these were different because it wasn't a public school, these were separate private schools, so it was very easy to keep those worlds separate, like
Yeah.
it's the thing with the library. The library could be curated very effectively for 8th graders and below, and then have a separate one, for high school. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, having these more curation for according to age. But this Louisiana bill, by the way, covers kindergarten through high school. So it's
Yeah, I does
sweeping.
there and the laws are difficult anyways to write and implement. They have to be so specific and they have to be clear. They should be to be able to be followed. And I think some things you just can't write laws for. This might be one of them. Like you can get rid of gender identity. You can absolutely.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
makes the way more sense.
Uh-huh. Yeah. I don't know if there was a specific. I'm assuming this bill was inspired just by all the talk about you know, groomers or whatever in school.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was a specific issue that happened in Louisiana that triggered this, as I don't normally follow Louisiana politics, but I'm curious to know what the primary, if there was some specific motivation, um, if they really thought through
Yeah.
all
You know,
the ways this bill could be used.
and I'd be curious what others think too. So if people want to leave a comment, do that and let us know what you think about this. Where's the line? Can you implement these laws?
Yes, absolutely. This is an encouragement to dialogue. So with that, I think that is a news roundup for this week. We'll see you all again next week.